Right, we're live. Hello and welcome to the Bible School show, and we're doing this live Q&A where we're just going to talk about some of the questions we get at the Bible School show, as well as just give us a chance to expand on some of the things we have talked about in Bible School show, maybe give some of the extras or details we didn't think we quite could in the show. And as always, if you'd like to give questions, there's an email that goes around. You can respond to that, or on the Podia website as well. If you go to this product, you can leave comments on this live or for the next one, and we can accept questions there. But so great to see you for this show. And as always, what the Bible School show, just a quick summary, is this kind of show every week where we're trying to find out more about Jesus and draw ourselves closer to him by a bit of Bible, a bit of theology, and a bit of church history. And each of us three try to specialise it as best we can into one of those fields. So today, what we wanted to cover was one of the kind of common questions, not just for Bible School show, but also just generally at St. Crispin's. One of the common questions is about the tabernacle. Because often we talk about the tabernacle, because last week we talked about the how-tos on Bible, theology and church history. And actually the tabernacle is one of these first examples where you get to kind of try out some of these how-tos. It's like this kind of mega example where you get to try out, because in that tabernacle, God is trying to actually explain the entire, not just Bible, but the entire universe in a building. And of course, each aspect of it has huge meaning. So we like to cover the tabernacle because it helps us basically explain what the entire Bible is all about. All of that is contained within this tabernacle. So another reason we actually love the tabernacle, that at St. Crispin's we have pictures on the wall where we have all these different furniture items of the tabernacle and how each one is representing something really big and teaching everybody who comes to this tabernacle something about Jesus, something about how they are going to meet Jesus and be saved by him. So today, we were just wanting to get into just one of these furniture items for now. If we have more time, we might cover more. But for now, we wanted to start with the most famous one, that first one which we might know of, the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah, and it's deep stuff. Like, as you said, at St. Crispin's, the way we structure everything at St. Crispin's is around the tabernacle. And although we're going to get into it more deeply in the Bible School show over the coming weeks, it's just that in principle there's that idea that in the tabernacle you have the inner room that represents heaven, and then an outer room that's kind of church, and then the rest of the tabernacle complex is the world generally. And we, in our sort of foundation documents about how we set up St. Crispin's and church, we use that pattern of like heaven, church, earth. The heaven, and then church, and then the earth. And we used it partly because at St. Crispin's it's got three floor, a ground floor. Go on, you explain that.
Ground floor, a middle floor, and an upper floor. And we do the service on the upper floor. We kind of have prayer meetings, fellowship meetings on the middle, and then evangelistic events on the bottom. So we call it the up, in, out, or the heaven, the church, and the earth kind of floors. And so, yeah, we structure all of the church around that motion.
Yeah. So we did, and we said, like, it's the heavenly worship, prayer, hearing the Bible, all that is on the top floor. And then we found that in the middle floor, it was like church family activities, and then on the ground floor looking outwards. And then, yeah, we found there was a great church planter guy who we were like heaven, church, earth, and he put it as up, in, and out to summarize that. But that just gives you a sense that for us, this tabernacle stuff is not like, because sometimes when I speak to people about the tabernacle, and you'll know it's a big part of what we do in the Bible School show, and you will see, like in the theology, and we're going to hear in the church history and in Bible study, it's a huge part. But it's even the way we structure all of church life. And the reason it's there at the beginning of the Bible is because we think there is the expectation that the Lord is setting this pattern and saying, this is how you should understand reality and understand church life. But, there's so much more to say there, but we're just going to zoom in on the Ark of the Covenant, as Jonathan said. And it's this piece of furniture that went in the inner room, the heavenly room. And the meaning of that comes out in different places in the Bible. Like in Daniel, when they see into heaven, and it's like a throne room with all the powers and angels and holy ones around, and then Jesus, the Son of Man, goes forward. And then in the same scene is in Revelation, but spelled out more carefully in Revelation, because in Revelation chapter 4, after the letters that Jesus dictates to the 7 churches in Turkey, it wouldn't have been Turkey, it's Asia Minor, isn't it? And the Turks, they came much later, didn't they, Pete? When did they start arriving in that region?
Surprisingly early. I won't get into the whole history, but then there was an invasion, of course. There were some peaceful Turkish interactions before, but when the Turks converted to Islam, then they started invading, of course, in the 11th century, and they took over Anatolia at that time.
Anatolia, that's the... okay then. So back then, it was Anatolia.
Yeah.
Well, so Jesus sent those letters to the churches of Anatolia. And then in Revelation chapter 4, John is like a door opens so he can see into that highest level of reality. And it says, after this I looked, there before me was a door standing open in heaven. And this voice says, come and see, I'll show you what must take place. And it says, at once I was in the Spirit, and there before me was a throne in heaven. A throne in heaven, someone sitting on it. And just that concept then, that at the very centre of heaven is a throne, and this Ark of the Covenant then, that was placed in the heavenly room in the tabernacle, is like that throne that's in the heavenlies. And of course, on the Ark of the Covenant, if you will see that in... what chapter is it in Exodus?
Exodus 25.
25. I was nearly going to say 25 or 26. And the description of it there...
Shall I read that section, maybe?
Well, you could do... you could read from verse 17 of Exodus 25. And Page, in a minute. Yeah. We've got a question about dog heads, so we'll ask you about that in a little while. Yeah.
And before I lose, Psalm 80 and 99 are the ones where it talks about... right, so I'll just read from 17 onwards. So make an atonement cover of pure gold, 2.5 cubits long and 1.5 cubits wide, and make 2 cherubim out of hammered gold at the ends of the cover. Make 1 cherub on one end and the second cherub on the other. Make the cherubim of one piece with the cover at the 2 ends. The cherubim are to have their wings spread upwards, overshadowing the cover with them. The cherubim are to face each other, looking towards the cover. Place the cover on top of the ark and put in the ark the tablets of the covenant law that I will give you. There, above the cover, between the 2 cherubim that are over the ark of the covenant law, I will meet with you and give you all my commands for the Israelites.
So you can see there, it's like these 2 angels on either side looking in with their arms, and then in the middle between them, the Lord will kind of be seated and then give commands. And so you can think that's like in heaven, there's the throne and all the angels around, and then from that place, the heavenly throne, he issues his commands. So there's the Ark of the Covenant, like this little picture of this heavenly throne. And then you'll know in 1 Samuel chapters 4 and 5, the Lord, they've forgotten the Lord. This is going forward like 400 years or so. And then there's this... they think, oh, well, as long as we've got the Ark of the Covenant, that's like an item of power. and it will we can't lose as long as we've got it. But the thing is, the Ark of the Covenant was about the Lord. It was supposed to make them relate to the Lord and believe in the Lord and remember the Lord. But they like, oh no, we don't need to worry about the Lord. We've got the Ark of the Covenant, and it's like, no, the Ark of the Covenant, in and of itself, it's just a box. Like, it's supposed to help you relate to the Lord Himself. But when they forgot the Lord, they went to battle, and they had the Ark of the Covenant. And when the Ark of the Covenant, the Philistines knew this was like the throne of the Lord, because it says. The Philistines, this is in 1 Samuel chapter 4 verse 5, when the Ark of the Lord's covenant came into the camp, all Israel raised such a great shout that the ground shook. Hearing the uproar, the Philistines asked, what's all the shouting in the Hebrew camp? When they learned that the Ark of the Lord had come into the camp, the Philistines were afraid, and they said, a god has come into the camp. They said, we're in trouble. Nothing like this has happened before. Woe to us. Who will deliver us from the hand of these mighty gods? They are the gods, or this is Elohim, who struck the Egyptians with all kinds of plagues in the desert. Be strong, Philistines, be men, or you'll be subject to the Hebrews. But so they fight because they're expecting we can't possibly win. If the Lord God, the living God, is with them, and the Ark of the Covenant was supposed to represent His presence with them, then the Philistines know we can't win. But He isn't with them. The Lord, they have forsaken the Lord, and the Lord therefore says, well, you're on your own then. And then the Philistines capture the Ark. And then, of course, in chapter 5, it's a great story. Do you want to tell that story?
I love this story. So if you are at chapter 5, I might even just read maybe to verse 5, because it's just fantastic. And again, it just shows you... Well, and let me just start with it, because it's a great, great story. So chapter 5 of 1 Samuel. After the Philistines had captured the Ark of God, they took it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. Then they carried the Ark into Dagon's temple and set it beside Dagon. So they thought their God had bested Israel's God, the church's God. And so they were doing this as a mockery. But if we keep reading, when the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, there was Dagon fallen on his face on the ground before the ark of the Lord. They took Dagon and put him back in his place. But the following morning when they rose, there was Dagon fallen on his face on the ground before the ark of the Lord. His head and hands had been broken off and were lying on the threshold. Only his body remained. And then verse 5 is just this... It's so weird, because obviously you'd think from this what your takeaway is, well then this must be the true God, let's serve him. But as we know, even in it, obviously Joshua also gave that kind of same command, but the church doesn't keep it, Israel doesn't keep it for long. But anyway, listen to this last verse. That is why to this day neither the priests of Dagon nor any others who enter Dagon's temple at Ashdod step on the threshold. So instead of worshipping this Lord God, they actually get afraid, and they really want Dagon. They don't really want this Lord God, even though they know he's more powerful. So they try to ship him off to other places.
And then when they try to get rid of the Ark of the Covenant because they can't contain this symbol of God, and then they stick it on a cart, and these cows pull it. And they say, well, let's let this happen. And then the cows just take it directly to the field of Jesus. Yeah. It's there in...
verse 12. Can I read? I love that one. Because they get these cows, and it's this big test. Is it the Lord God really? So verse 12, then the cows, though, after this test, went straight up towards Beth Shemesh, keeping on the road and lowing all the way. They did not turn to the right or to the left. I love that, because the Philistines do this test as if, they're kind of nervous. Could this be, what if it's a coincidence? But then, not only do these cows go straight back, but they never waver, and they're singing the entire journey. So I love that, especially because I love animals. Whenever it's an animal that's praising God in the Bible, I love that most. So that's why that's one of my favourite verses for that. These cows were singing the entire way back. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, and then they arrive at the field of Jesus, and then the sacrifice there. So the Ark of the Covenant then has this enormous significance in the Bible because it represents the presence of God, but it's really about the throne of God enthroned between the cherubim and all that. And I know that's in the Psalms as well.
Yeah.
But go on, give us a quick. Yeah, go on, give us that quick one.
Psalm 80 and Psalm 99. I was just quick because I knew. So Psalm 80. I'll just read this one. Hear us, shepherd of Israel, you who lead Joseph like a flock, you who sit enthroned between the cherubim. Shine forth before Ephraim, Benjamin, and Manasseh. Awaken your might. Come and save us. So again, and Psalm 99 as well.
Same.
Yeah.
So that's something of the biblical flavour of the Ark of the Covenant, this tremendous sign of the throne of the divine emperor. And Jesus sits on that throne with his Father in the highest heaven, of course. And this Ark of the Covenant represents that. Now, you might say, well, that's interesting in the Bible, but of course, the Ark of the Covenant, it's nothing to do with the New Testament. It probably disappeared sometime and no one knows where it's gone, and it's disappeared from the history of the world now. I mean, some people do take the view that maybe it was caught up to heaven and that it's been stored safely in the highest heaven because in case, that's a safe place for it to be. Some people say in the exile it was completely lost and it's never been recovered and no one knows where it is. And of course that leads to films like Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark, all that. And this idea that maybe it's out there and people have had it. But it actually, this is what PJ's going to tell us perhaps. Oh, and we're going to get to the dog heads. Don't worry about that. Because that is also about North African church history, isn't it? So, but is it the case then that the Ark of the Covenant is just completely disappeared? Or can church history throw some light onto it?
Yeah, the Ethiopian church, and you may know about this when Ethiopia gets in the news. The Ethiopians have the Ark of the Covenant, and they have different traditions explaining why. There's a bit of debate exactly when it got to Ethiopia.
Give us a bit of that. Could it have been even before the New Testament?
Yeah.
Give us a bit of that.
Well, it has to be before the New Testament, because we see in Hebrews, the author of the book of Hebrews, Paul, he describes the temple worship going on as a concurrent thing. He said, this is what they do in the temple. But then he says, with the Ark of the Covenant, he's like, that was,
Yeah.
So it's no longer in the temple as he's kind of in it, as he's describing what he's seen. He's not seeing the Ark of the Covenant. So that's an interesting thing to note. So it definitely went missing before Paul worshipped in the temple. So, but there's this one book that the Ethiopians have, and it's not quite canon, but they really love it. You know how, like, the creed, loads of churches say the creed, so it's like almost canon, but it's not actually the apostles did write the Apostles' Creed, but then you got like the Nicene Creed, and everyone likes that one as well. But so the apostles didn't write that, so it's not canon, but it's like almost. So it's sometimes people put it in Bibles and things, and the Ethiopians have a book that they love just that much. Called the Kebra-Nagast, it's a slightly different pronunciation. I'm still working on my Ethiopic, but it's often called that in English. That it's called the Glory of Kings, because you know how when Samuel first appoints kings in ancient Israel, he's given a scroll and he's told what to expect from kings and all of that. So that part of it is a part of this book. What's included in that scroll. All of the Lord's instructions for kings. But then there's also all this history about why the Lord particularly cares about the Ethiopian emperors. And, like, if you read a lot of the Bible, you'll think, oh, of course the Lord loves the Ethiopian emperors. That's all throughout the Bible. And we see Jesus, he
personally.
Yeah, he loves the Ethiopians, and he brings up the Queen of Sheba, who was the empress of Ethiopia and southern Arabia. A long time before, and of course he knew her when she came to the temple, and he's remembering her when he's in his earthly ministry, and he's talking about how she will help judge on Judgment Day, you know, which is an incredible thought. So we know, of course, all throughout the Bible that Jesus loves the Ethiopian Empire. So yeah, that might be obvious, but then you think, why though exactly? Why does Jesus love Ethiopia so much? And they explain that they're ruled.
This
by,
is in the Kebra-Nagast, yeah.
That they're ruled by like an offshoot, a cadet dynasty of the House of Solomon, and you know they have been since the time of Solomon, and so they're like a part of Israel. They were a Gentile nation, kind of, or they're descendants from Abraham, but they're, you know, so like only Gentiles like Ishmaelites are and so on. But yeah, this kind of, and they joined in totally with Israel, so that they have an Israelite king, and we see the Ethiopian eunuch, he kind of offers sacrifices for Ethiopia in the temple, so they join in totally with Israel. So that's one reason the Lord loves them. And of course he decides to entrust the Ark of the Covenant with them, because when it comes to the exile, or in the Kebra-Nagast, they even have the Lord entrust the Ark of the Covenant to the Ethiopians right at the time of Solomon. So like, because once Solomon brings in his mount of abominations and everything, the Lord's like, nah, I can't have my ark here while this is all going on. I've got to get it out.
Because it isn't mentioned in the Bible after Solomon, is it? In the Old Testament. So it's totally plausible that the Lord's like, no, give it to the Ethiopians. They'll look after it properly.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So, yeah, it gets moved over there, although some say it might have moved at the time of Jeremiah, so he was saved from the exile.
Yeah, I've just been reading that myself. And they go to North Africa, don't they? They flee, some of them, to North Africa in Jeremiah. So,
So that's another theory. So, because the Kebra-Nagast isn't canon, so even in Ethiopia, there's people who might subscribe to that theory. But they do love this story anyway. So then, yeah, you can see that Ethiopia decided to wholly join in with church and kind of became the first. Because we talk a lot about, like, Christendom and that sort of idea of an entire nation decides to be caught up with church. And like, you know, God doesn't just want like a smaller vision of church. He wants church to encompass every part of a life, and we don't segment our lives into, oh, this is my normal real life, and then I have a, like, you know, a church life just for Sunday or something. He wants church to encompass everything, and the Ethiopians wanted that, and so he loved them because of that. So that they joined in with temple worship and all of that, and then the Ethiopian eunuch, of course, spreads Christianity back in Ethiopia in the 1st century. But then, you know, there's still debates about, oh, is Jesus really, you know, the promised Messiah and everything? And so they don't quite figure that out until the 4th century. There's the Emperor Ezena, then he decides formally, like, yeah, Jesus is the promised Messiah, and so then he makes Christianity the official religion. But Christianity already had been the official religion, you know, but in that kind of technical way, you know, that he just formalizes, like, yeah, Jesus was the Messiah. We've got that on paper. Boom. And that kind of Athanasius has an important part in making that come about, and loads of the Coptic popes. So then there's a connection between Egyptian and Ethiopian Christianity. Like in the Bible, we see the Ethiopians and the Egyptians all, like, very often at war. They're kind of hate each other a lot of the time, but then in Christ that ancient rivalry gets put aside and they actually become like one church for a bit, and then in Haile Selassie's time they became independent. But anyway, that all that history is interesting because of how they think about the Ark of the Covenant. And
the Ark of the Covenant,
and they are like Old Testament Christians, really. Because, as I said, they don't really see Ezena in a way as bringing in Christianity. It's like they'd always been Christians. So they're just continuing what they always believed. And they always joined in with temple worship. So when you kind of have this New Testament vision, where it's like there's loads of little temples all over the world, they build literal little temples, basically. They're churches. And lots of Orthodox churches call their church buildings temples. And then, but it's like really clear that's what's going on in an Ethiopian church. Because one of the things they all do, they make a copy of the Ark of the Covenant. Whenever there's a new church, they have to like see the Ark of the Covenant.
Really?
Yeah. So every church has to have a little Holy of Holies, and then the holy place, and then the kind of bit that represents the world. They've got to have the Ark of the Covenant. They've got to have, you know, the lampstand and everything.
In all church plants, like in Ethiopic church, they have a little Ark of the Covenant. Yeah.
they've got to build a tabernacle or
Right.
a temple every single time, and it's an awesome fact about Ethiopia.
So where is it in Ethiopia exactly? Does anyone have the original one? Or
Yeah.
they really do.
The Church of Our Lady of Zion in the Tigray region, I believe.
Right. And it's actually there. Is it possible for even... Could we go and see it?
Well, not exactly, because of course, as you've seen in Indiana Jones, it's very dangerous to see it.
Oh, yeah.
So they are careful about it, but every year, don't they? And we've seen these clips online of it happening. They do parade it out for people to see, like.
But it's covered, isn't it? They don't just get
for the safety
of
health and
people.
safety,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an understandable regulation there, but they
After
do.
Isaiah, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, I know. You can never be too careful. Yeah, so they do parade it there so that everyone sees the original, but then also, and part of the idea is they see that and they have confidence in their own churches because they're like, yeah, we are a continuation of that original, like ancient Israel, which is kind of like the original church in a way. And they say, yeah, we are just joining in with that, and seeing the ark that way really kind of reignites the faith of Ethiopians. So it's a beloved festival there. And a great thing to see. So if you're ever in Ethiopia, do check it out.
Head there.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that like the notion of that Christianity in North Africa, where you've got the Ethiopic Copts, all this sort of thing. It's so strong, so theological. Like all the top theologians, really, for the first 500 years, they're all these Africans. And then you've got and Ethiopia is so strongly Christian right down to today. But like what I found fascinating was just when we think about church history, like sometimes not us, but some of the books, if I look around and I think they cover like a very safe kind of church history. Because like the question that we got there, Pippi Bailey has asked us about the dog heads. And that is this idea that church history, like you've given us just there a bit of church history that really doesn't often come up, the idea of the Ark of the Covenant and how rich church history is in Ethiopia. I know loads of this. You have lots of saints in global church history from the Ethiopic tradition. This idea of dog heads, it'd be good if you do explain a little bit of that to us.
Yeah, it's an awesome kind of feature of so much of church history, because there's stories about them in like kind of Russia, Ukraine area. There's like Afghanistan and North Africa, as you say. In the Frankish Empire as well, we've particularly loved this letter by this monk called Ratramnus, where he explains what dog heads are, and then the question of like, do we preach to them? Do we include them in church? And he concludes, yes, like we need to preach to dog heads. They do need to be saved. And Saint Christopher, if you're called Christopher, you are in fact named after a dog-headed saint. Probably the most famous one, I think it's fair to say. He's very beloved because of how strange he is almost. Apologies to any like dog heads watching, but there's people who've still got to get used to them. So in a lot of Ethiopian stories, the dog heads appear, and they're very beloved in Ethiopian stories because they kind of in stories, though they totally believe it's real because it appears in the Ethiopian Synexarium and so on, like official kind of canonized parts of their liturgy. But what they kind of really do in stories is present an extreme, really, of like what Christians can be, because people will be like, you've got to be a human to get in church. They'll have even, and it's like, no, not even that. Like anything, like God could save anyone, and He wants to. So you get these kind of massive, these giant dog heads, and they're at first cannibals, but when they convert, they're not allowed to be anymore. But you can imagine thinking what are we totally not allowed to be in church? It's like, well, yeah, cannibals, you can't let them in. You can't let non-humans in. You can't, And there's these stories where, sometimes the apostles kind of think that, and they're like, I've gone out to all nations, and I'm beginning to get used to that idea that there's all nations, but I'm not sure about dog heads yet. And then God's like, no, you've got to. So, like, you know, James, the son of Alphaeus, and Matthew, they encounter one of Christopher's ancestors, who's the king of the Dogheads in North Africa. And there's
Christopher's dad is the king of the Dogheads.
Well, yeah, his dad is, and also his ancestor, because Christopher's
right.
like in the 4th century.
Oh yeah, that's right. Sorry.
But he's the prince of the Dogheads of that particular tribe. There's different tribes of Dogheads, and in the Book of the 12, when it comes out, there's a big appendix I've written where I gather together all the ancient sources on Dogheads, the different types of Dogheads, where they come from, and all of that. So, you know, if you're really interested in all the different tribes and then you really want to get to the bottom of Dogheads, you know, I've got a lot of stuff on it, but it's too long to cover here. But yeah, so you get those North African ones. Christopher was the prince of these Dogheads, and he's descended from an illustrious line. And the 1st century king of those Dogheads met Matthew and James. And another one of that tribe got to meet Andrew and Bartholomew, and Rufus and Alexander. And then Andrew met loads of Dogheads, and he was always scared of them, and it's an interesting thing, like how he never quite got over it. They always kind of unnerved him, and each time he had to steel himself. There was a whole city of Dogheads in one of the stories in Afghanistan, and he has to go there, and those particular dogheads are said to be very, very just, and because they're so just, like the prophet Simeon, they're allowed to live for hundreds of years.
Really?
Yeah, so they're very holy and just. The Afghanistan, I forget exactly, I think they're called the Calistrians,
right?
These dogheads. So there's all that, and then Augustine thinks a lot about them. And then Ratramnus as well. Ratramnus writes a much bigger work on it, but Augustine, you can tell us, thought a lot about them. And he does kind of think it's like really like.
Did you mention the letter?
Yeah, Ratramnus.
Yes, right.
Oh yeah, no, I'll explain it in more detail actually,
Yeah.
because it's very, very fun. That Ratramnus, he's this monk. He writes loads of like pastoral stuff and loads of theological issues. And in the midst of all these letters and theological tracts and all of that, there's one, and he treats it just the same as everyone else, where someone's written and says, well, there's all these dog-headed people in my parish. And he describes what they're like. He says they have pet dogs, which he finds is quite weird, and they're able to talk to the dogs. They can also understand humans, but they can't talk human language, and that's an obvious barrier that needs to be crossed. But they can understand the humans, you know, and they talk to their dogs. So he finds that weird, and they make clothes and everything, and they build villages and all that. So it's like they seem like they're rational creatures, but they don't seem totally angelic either, because they're like just surviving. They eat food. They have to hunt. They have to, you know,
Well,
whereas
they're quite
angels
fierce sometimes, aren't they?
yeah, like
right.
2 meters tall, with like sometimes they describe flaming eyes and things and all of that. Like some of them, the one that Bartholomew and Andrew met in the 1st century North Africa, that he was particularly terrifying. He ends up being called Christian the Doghead. But he had big tusks and big red eyes and very tall.
He terrified a whole village, wasn't it? A village he called the Apostles in.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. Oh, I mean, again,
Look, there's so many stories.
You'll have to get the book of the 12.
Get the book of the 12 that you've
When it
written.
comes
You've
out.
got all the research about. And the thing, what's interesting, isn't it, is just that sense that church history is far more interesting, and the world itself far more interesting than people ever imagine.
Yeah.
And that there's things that are like, when you read the Bible and it's got like such unusual things in it, and people go, oh well, you know, that's like in the Bible, but the world isn't like that. And it says, no, the world has been like that, full of weird and wonderful things. Again, apologies to any dogheads that are tuning into the YouTube stream. We're not saying you're weird or anything, but we are saying you're wonderful, and you're always welcome at church. But it's like there's a lot of these sort of church history things, and it makes us like, just as like when we were looking at the Ark of the Covenant, and like the way that the Ark of the Covenant was carried and put in a temple, and the god, what was it, Dagon, you know, gets crushed. Like the world, when you like, I always feel like if you're not a Christian and you're not reading the Bible and you're not like part of this kingdom of the heavens, life is very flat and boring. nothing wonderful can really happen. You know, it's all just very flat. And it's almost as if like you can't experience wonderful things because they're not in your horizon. Like, and it's as if the Lord can't trust you with anything wonderful. Whereas when you do like become part of the empire of the heavens, like you start to learn that how wonderful the world is now, but even and all these wonderful stories from the past, and it makes you I find your expectations of the living God grow.
Yeah. And you can tell how these Christians in the past that talk about dog heads and other things like satyrs, because like Saint Anthony the Great encountered a satyr, and that story got told a lot. And Athanasius writes that initial biography of Anthony the Great, and you can tell it had kind of been bugging him because we'd been talking the other day about this particular verse in Isaiah where satyrs appear, and there's this question that's like, oh, what's the Lord doing with them? And some translations write them out entirely. They're like, oh, he must mean goat. And, you know, they're half right, at least. But then you can tell, like, it must have bothered Athanasius. It's like, oh, what do we do about satyrs? And then this particular satyr is friends with a hermit called Paul, and he can point Anthony towards Paul. And he seems saved. And then St. Isidore mentions the fact that maybe it was that satyr, maybe a different one, but Anthony had a close satyr friend in later life, and they would pray together constantly. And so you can tell, though, isn't it? They were reading their Bible, and then the phoenix appears, you know, and there's other wonderful creatures. There's basilisks and things, cockatrices, and people wonder. It's like, oh right, so like we kind of understand some creatures, like cows, we kind of understand, and you know, when the Bible mentions cows, you're like, all right, so that's like a domesticated animal that we can kind of eat and get milk and cheese from and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, we understand that. And then Athanasius, obviously, to an extent, didn't understand satyrs. It's like, what do we do with that? And then it seems like they are rational, sentient people like us. They need to be invited into church and all of that. And that's kind of the conclusion he comes to.
What I always find funny about it is, like, sometimes modern people are like, oh, can you handle people who are different? And I'm like, well, we are never. Who of us is facing the level of difference that our ancestors did, inviting into church dog heads, satyrs, you know, and then outside you might have a basilisk or something, and you just think, yeah, like our concept of how different people might be in church is nothing compared to our ancestors who wrote letters about coping with it. Yeah. I do love that. Look, that was amazing, and we'll always come back to some of these interesting stories. Church history. Do you want to just raise the question that Dick has put there, Dick Curley? Yeah.
So Dick's just mentioned there the fact that in Revelation 11, the ark is seen in heaven. So what?
Do you want to read the verse? Yeah.
So shall I read? I'll just read that verse 19 here. So
Revelation 11, verse 19. Yeah.
Yes. Then God's temple in heaven was opened, and within his temple was seen the ark of his covenant. And there came flashes of lightning, rumbling, peals of thunder, an earthquake, and a severe hailstorm.
Okay, so that is why in the beginning of the show, when we were saying I mentioned that one of the theories that some Christians have, obviously not the Ethiopians because they know where it actually is, but might say, but it like that's where it is. It's there in the highest heaven, and John sees it, but what it actually says is there is a heavenly temple, and that in that heavenly temple there is a heavenly Ark of the Covenant, which is really the throne of God. Because if you remember, the Ark of the Covenant represents like the throne of God. But I mean the understanding that like you would have on this is that ark of in just the earthly replica is a replica of the heavenly Ark of the Covenant, which is the actual throne on which God sits. And the reason that is, like, evidence for that is if you go back to Revelation chapter 4 and verse 5, here, notice that the Ark of the Covenant in Revelation 11:19, what we're arguing is that the heavenly Ark of the Covenant is the throne of God, right? So the Ark of the Covenant is the heavenly Ark of the Covenant in Revelation 11:19 is accompanied with the flashes of lightning, rumbling, peals of thunder, earthquake, all that sort of thing. All those effects that are generated almost by this throne of God. And you'll see that through Revelation. And also, it happens in Exodus 19, of course. And when the heavenly throne, really, that's the argument, it is on the top of the mountain. These effects happen, the lightning, the thunder. But in Revelation chapter 4 and verse 5, from the throne came flashes of lightning, rumbling, and peals of thunder. See? So and then the Ark of the Covenant, there came flashes of lightning, rumbling, peals of... So the argument is, I mean, you may or may not find that persuasive, but it does look as if the throne of God produces these lightning, rumbling, earthquakes, all this sort of thing. And then in the Revelation 11:19, that throne of God is described as the heavenly Ark of the Covenant. And also that fits really with the Exodus concept, that when Moses, if it was the throne of God that is present at the top of Sinai in Exodus 19 and 20 and so on, it fits with the idea that Moses goes up into the thick darkness and sees the heavenly reality, and then he's told to make the tabernacle and the furniture according to what he was shown on the mountain. Yeah. So then the argument is, so he saw the heavenly Ark of the Covenant, and he saw the heavenly lampstands, and he saw all, he sees the heavenly things, and then is able to replicate them, make earthly copies. So that's the argument, that the Ark of the Covenant referred to in Revelation 11:19 is in fact, that's the Lord, that God sits on the heavenly Ark of the Covenant, just as the angel Lord sits on it in the tabernacle on earth.
Because the word ark doesn't mean like a box or something. So if Moses made it according to the shape he saw, the shape of the throne in heaven, you'd have to describe the throne of the Father as an ark.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's the idea, that the Father's throne is the heavenly Ark of the Covenant. So that's the argument. Again, you could make of that as you will. Yeah. So we said we'd do 40 minutes, 45 minutes. Thanks for it. Well, you say yeah.
Well, yeah. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to again. Dogheads it's a fantastic bit of and we've got a picture. I quickly tried to navigate. That is Saint Nicholas, I think, as he's preaching to the wolfheads. But you can find pictures like this if you search for Saint Christopher, who I think he is a doghead, isn't he?
Yeah.
And he's a saint. So that will get you images this as well. Yep. And then also we want to talk a bit about the Ark of the Covenant. That was great. We love to.
And it's good that people were putting in questions and topics that they want to cover. Please, every month.
Yes.
Go on.
Yes. So it's the first Wednesday of every month at 5 p.m. we will do these live Q&As. So if you'd like questions to send us, send it to through Podia. You can either do it comments on in the product of this live Q&A we'll set up for next month, or you can email our Podia email and send the questions through there, or soon we will set up a community through Podia.
Yes.
So that will also be this place where not only can we store questions, but we might be able to answer them there and then as well. So those are all these options we're setting up if you'd like to send questions in. But thank you so much for tuning in, everyone, and hope to see you next month with more questions and hopefully more things we can talk about as well. So thank you for tuning, and see you next month.
Yeah.
Thank you.